Hello, I'm Bob Bowman, Managing Editor of Supply Chain Brain, and I'm joined in conversation today with Omer Bakkalbasi. He is Chief Innovation Officer with Solvoyo. Omer, welcome.
It's very nice to be here, Bob. Thank you.
Why don't you tell us what you do and how people use your solution?
Solvoyo helps companies design and operate their supply chains more efficiently. Our platform has capabilities in supply chain planning, in strategic, tactical, and in operational settings. In the strategic arena, we help you design your network, we help you deploy your inventory so as to maximize your revenue or minimize your total cost to serve. On the tactical side, we forecast your demand, we set your inventory target levels, your replenishment frequency, and at an operational level, for each SKU, we help you find a fine balance between supply and demand while taking into account issues of demand, supply, transportation, and customer service levels.
That's a really interesting approach, the idea that you're approaching planning from both a tactical and a strategic level, because so many companies have had a lot of trouble combining those two things in their organizations. So I take it that's an important part of what you consider to be your offering.
Absolutely. In the past, classical systems were not sufficient in either computing power or in their approach to planning. So the barriers were speed, scale, and concurrency. Let me explain that a little bit. With high number of SKUs, you need to be able to plan with sufficient levels of speed at the SKU level. The concurrency comes from the fact that you have to make decisions now, not only at the silo level, but across silos, where you plan for your fulfillment and transportation together, your transportation and inventory together, your production and distribution together.
Well, let's talk about the client for a moment. What makes a good client, in your opinion?
First of all, a good client is a partner. They help you design their strategy and then build an incremental plan to actualize it. A good client also considers process level improvements concurrently with software deployment. And finally, a good client actually values its data. For concurrent decisions across silos, you need to be able to have your data internally consistent and of high quality if you want to make decisions across supply, demand, inventory, transportation, and customer service fulfillment.
You seem to be suggesting that a good client does not consider this solution to be something that it just plugs in one day and all of a sudden it works, that there's some business process change and partnership involved as well as taking on the software itself.
Absolutely, Bob. Simply automating all bad habits robs the clients of significant value that you can bring onto the table.
Yeah. Well, what have you learned in implementation? Because when you get down into the trenches and you actually have to make these solutions work, what are some of the lessons that emerge?
Again, I would come back to data. For implementations, especially for those implementations across silos, you need to have your data internally consistent and of high quality. You also have to approach the implementation as an opportunity to review some of your processes and perhaps combine them. By way of an example, a client of ours who had different processes and departments for credit checks and fulfillment allocation and transportation ended up combining all those into one process and automated them together. And that's when they realized unbelievable returns, up to 20% from their base transportation spend.
I imagine also that clients in implementation have to have good data to start with, don't they? And they have to have access to point of sale data and downstream data and consumer demand trends in order to make planning possible. Is that an essential part of the planning process?
Absolutely, especially if you're planning on building an outside-in demand-driven supply chain, then you have to have your internal as well as your external data consistent. That includes not only point of sale data, but marketing data, and with big data enabled by all the social media as well as Internet of all things, you need to you need to be able to have a good handle on the quality of that and accessibility of that data as well.
Now, inherent in the concept of planning, obviously, is the idea of the future. Yes. That's everything. The theme of this conference is the supply chain of the future. How do you interpret that?
Yeah, we're very excited about the future. The future supply chain will continue to have its current challenges of high number of SKUs, globalization where you buy anywhere, procure from anywhere, sell anywhere approach. And then, of course, you have the big data and the talent shortage challenges. But the supply chain of the future that I see is driven by customer requirements outside in. A future supply chain will have to be able to respond to different buying behavior of the customers. A future supply chain will have to look at concurrent planning across silos, and be able to have a planning approach that closes the gap between operations and planning. That's a concept we call in software closed-loop operational management, where your plans and your execution more or less are blurred by being able to provide SKU-level detailed specifications for action, whether that's demand planning, transportation planning, fulfillment, or those that are done together.
But we've been talking about a so-called pull supply chain, a supply chain geared to customer demand, demand-driven supply chain, whatever you want to call it. We've been talking about that for decades. What makes it possible now that we can finally realize this dream after all this time? Is it technology that was not there before? Is it a new attitude toward business process? I mean, what changes the landscape that makes it possible to finally achieve what we've been trying to achieve for all these years?
You're absolutely right, Bob. There has been promises of performance that has not been realized by supply chain planning approaches. But I'm excited about some of the new capabilities. One of those is the ability to use the cloud as a large computational engine. The other one is the availability of external data, although the challenge to make sense of it still remains. But there is a big trend now in supply chain leaders in looking at concurrent planning, where you make decisions across these silos, doing production and distribution together, forecasting, inventory management, and replenishment and production all in one platform, where the input to forecasting actually affects output of the production plan. Those kinds of approaches really, really excite me, and I do see potential with the ability to do SKU-level planning using the power of the cloud, and to be able to use the data, internal and external, in more creative ways. The promise of a more effective future supply chain will be realized.
You've mentioned a couple of times the idea of planning and working across silos. This is a huge problem in organizations, and you might almost say that it's an aspect of human nature that's hard to overcome. Do you find that in your clients that they are successfully addressing the challenge of cooperating across silos?
They are trying. The challenge remains in making sure that the KPIs that drive each one of those silos are aligned. That's number one, and that's done through leadership and processes. But once you have been able to do that, then the next challenge comes in from being able to plan across those silos. The requirements and the demands and the goals of one silo may differ from the other. By way of example, you may want to keep inventory levels low, which would require that you have more frequent shipments. But more frequent shipments would require high transportation costs. The trick is to be able to optimize across those two.
One of the big challenges out there is the existence of so-called big data today. There is so much data out there, which on its surface would seem like a good thing. We want data. The more the better, right? On the other hand, we are in danger of drowning in data, not being able to make sense of it, not being able to separate the noise from the important stuff. So in the planning process, what are some of the things you can do, or what do you advise your clients to do in order to somehow find the proper type of data and ignore the rest?
Very good point, Bob. The data challenge, the big data challenge is there, and it will be there in the future. The key is to find the right approach and the right analytical horsepower in order to make sense of that data. What I recommend my clients to do is actually hire good statisticians and hire good industrial engineers who can make sense of that data. And that data is best used in trying to sense the demand that the supply chain is going to see, as well as refining and optimizing the parameters that drive that supply chain, including service level targets, frequency of shipments, safety stock, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Another one of the themes at this conference we're at here today is that of supply chain excellence, which is a term that has been bandied about for years also and has tended to lose its meaning.
Yes.
Becomes a little bit of a buzzword. What does supply chain excellence really mean to you?
Supply chain excellence is not an end state, in my opinion, but a process. Excellence means that you continually seek to improve where you want to be and where you want to go. In my opinion, an excellent supply chain actually is driven by customer needs. It responds to different customer buying behavior. An excellent supply chain measures customer satisfaction and responds to it appropriately. And of course, while satisfying customer requirements, you also have to operate in an efficient and effective manner as well. That's what I think excellence is.
So you don't wake up one morning and say, we have achieved supply chain excellence, our job is done. It doesn't work that way, does it?
Absolutely not. There's always room to improve. There are always challenges, and the world is changing so fast. What is excellent today may not be that excellent tomorrow.
Now let me challenge you, because I happen to note the existence of the word innovation in your title, which means you have to wake up every morning and be thinking way ahead of the rest of us. What are some of the really exciting innovations you think might come around the corner in supply chain? Not just an extension of what we already see today, but what do you really see way out there that we might be dealing with sometime in the future?
Again, my innovation efforts are driven by the use of current and future technology. What I see as number one is that the computational capabilities enabled by cloud and by advances in computing technology has enabled us to plan things at the SKU level, whether that's network design at the SKU level, whether that's fulfillment and transportation performed by large companies that have 20 or so distribution centers, thousands of stores, and make millions of decisions every day. With the right approach, you can make those decisions. So number one in the future is computing power. Number two, I would say, is again making use of big data. Big data has been here. We simply added to it. But the number of people who actually make sense of it are still very few. And it does require quantitative capabilities of a statistician and an industrial engineer to make sense of it. And the best use of the large amounts of data is in our future ability to automatically feed back into your planning system and update the parameters automatically. And that's something that we're working on right now.
And just when companies think they might have gotten it down, especially on the retail side, all of a sudden we have the Omnichannel. And suddenly we have to be doing this for brick and mortar, we have to be doing it for e-commerce, we have to be doing it for a combination of all the above. Absolutely. And so suddenly we have a more complicated landscape than we ever had before. So that makes your challenge even more exciting, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And again, omnichannel fulfillment in retail is an area that we have a few success stories in as well. And it requires that you not only have your data in a consistent manner. In omnichannel fulfillment, you have to be able to perform planning across functions, especially fulfillment, credit checks, allocation, and transportation.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
I'm looking forward to the challenges of the supply chain of the future, and in Solvoyo, we're looking forward to working with our clients to get there.
Well, we're very excited about that. We'll look forward to your future as well. Omer, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Bob. It's been a pleasure.
I've been speaking with Omer Bakkalbasi of Solvoyo. Thank you very much for watching.